Hi Sharks, it's Financial Sharktress Galit Today we are going to talk about a topic that is very tough and also very near and dear to my heart. We're going to talk about paying for IVF, and I'm in that position. And this is not the position that I wanted to be in. This is not the position that I thought I'd ever be in. Um, but here we are. Um, I am also in the position of not having a W-2 income because I run my own business. And so my insurance benefits, I live in the state of Arizona, and they are not required to provide fertility benefits in the state of Arizona for insurance companies. And many states are like that. In fact, I think there's only about 19 states that require corporations or large companies with like huge HR systems and stuff like that to offer any type of fertility benefits. It's kind of like a wild, wild west out there when it comes to fertility benefits. And I know when I looked for my insurance, I had an idea that maybe I would need fertility benefits. I had already been trying sometime for to have a baby unsuccessfully. Um, and that was just not an option, no matter how much I paid for insurance. And I pay a really high amount for insurance. So that's where I am. And there are tons of women and couples and people out there going through this. And many times we are silent because we are embarrassed and we don't want to talk about it. And we don't know anyone else who has been through it, is going through it. Um, Now you know me. I'm here. And I am pretty transparent with my story and who I am and what I believe in. And I think that for me, this is no different. I want to be open and I want to be honest about what's going on in my life and the hardships that I'm going through. And this is a big one. This is something that has been going on now for almost 3 years. Obviously, not IVF yet. That is my next step. Um, but I've gone through 5 failed medicated cycles for IUIs, and that is basically so taking medication, trying to create as many eggs as you possibly can, and then having the sperm inserted into you right where it should be, in hopes that you will conceive. Um, yeah, so I have been through all that, and everything has been paid out of pocket because, of course, my insurance does not cover anything. Um, Now, when thinking about IVF, it's a huge financial burden. It is a huge um, a huge financial expense that I hoped not to have to undergo. Um, and I want to talk to you about the research I've done so that maybe you can make an informed decision on how you can better afford IVF if that is something that happens to you. Listen, it happens to a lot more women than you think, a lot more people than you think. Um, there are same-sex couples out there trying to have kids as well. And there are women out there trying to do it alone. I'm in several Facebook groups and several support groups, and every single person going through this is amazing and brave and wants this more than anything, as do I. Yeah. Whew. Okay. This is clearly a very emotional topic for me. So if you see me start to cry, that it'll pass and I can still give you the information. It is something that is very emotional for me. So, yeah. So what have I thought about? So first of all, just to give you kind of an idea of how things go. So an IUI, which was the basically inserting the sperm into past the cervix and hoping it goes up the tubes and fertilizes an egg. So that in general can cost like 1,000 to in my people say 1,000 to 2,000, but I've seen more 1,000 to almost 3,000. And that is because the medications are expensive and the monitoring is expensive and insurance is not. If insurance is not covering it, that can add up. So we're talking that is per cycle. So that is every single month. For an IUI, you are looking at from 1,000 to almost $3,000 a cycle. 3,000 is obviously on the high end. Mine were all the monitoring and stuff included. I was a little bit over 2,000 per cycle. And that is because the medication tended to work a little too well on me and caused some issues as well. So that's what you're looking at with IUI. When you go up to IVF, you are talking about 15 to 20,000 a cycle. And once you factor in medication and you factor in additional monitoring costs and other little bits and pieces, I've spoken to women who think 30,000 to 50,000, with the majority being around 30,000. If you go to a very expensive clinic, it could be, 50,000 for a cycle. And that is one cycle. That is one shot. There is no guarantee. I know many women who have done multiple cycles and have spent probably over $100,000 to $150,000 on IVF. So it is a huge expense, and it is something that, listen, it is really hard to afford. And having a family should not be the expense of it should not be the barrier to you having a family. Now, what are some ways to overcome that? Okay, so here's what I'm looking at. I found a clinic called CNY Fertility, and they have a few offices and they do very high volume, and they are about a third of the national average for IVF. And so that is who I'm going with. I have a local fertility clinic here in Arizona, and they just couldn't come up with it. I could not go with them. The numbers don't make sense for me. Obviously, I'm looking at it from a financial standpoint, and I want to have the money to take care of my child, or to put a down payment on a house, or to have a savings account, or it just doesn't make sense for me to spend so much more when I have been with this clinic for many months now and did not feel that they took that even though I advocated for myself, I felt like I was not a priority, and they did not listen. And Unfortunately, a lot of these fertility clinics, you're just a number to them. And they're just trying to put you through standard protocol. And that was not the experience that I was looking for at that price level, right? You think you're going to pay additional and you're going to get better experience and a little, someone listening when you talk. And unfortunately, that was not the case for me with my clinic. And so I decided to go with CNY. Now, the cool thing about CNY is not only are they like a third of the price, so we are talking like the actual IVF, some of the packages are like less than $7,000, right? So that is like unheard of, right? You're half the price, and that is including medication and including monitoring and including all of these things that the other places don't include. And the way that they can do that is with like a high volume. So obviously I know it's going to be like in out, but I know that makes sense for me, right? I'm capable of advocating for myself now that I am in a bunch of support groups. I'm in a bunch of different Facebook groups about this. I know what to ask for. I have a plan. I know what I want to do, and I'm going to do it. So the crazy thing about this is there are very few, so it has very few locations. It does not have a location in Arizona. The closest one to me is Colorado Springs. And so even with travel costs to flying to Colorado or driving to Colorado and staying somewhere, it still comes out cheaper to go with them. Now, the other cool thing that I found is grants. So I have been applying to as many grants as I can get my hands onto. So I've spent a lot of time researching, and there are many databases and many resources for this. I think CNY itself has a list. I think that's kind of where I started. But there are so many grants available. And I apply, CNY actually has its own grant, which they give it to one person a month. So every month I get a chance to possibly get a cycle covered. And it covers a cycle and medication and a hotel stay. And it's really cool what there is out there. So look for grants. And there are grants based on religion. There are grants based on where you are in life. There are so many different grants that you can apply to. So see what categories you fit into and think about what you can apply to. Another thing with your insurance, so they might not cover all of your fertility treatments, but there might be certain things that they do cover. So that's something to ask about. If maybe they'll cover like a doctor's visit to talk about results, or they'll cover maybe an ultrasound or 2 ultrasounds, like all of that stuff adds up. And just for an idea, like I paid $300 per ultrasound. So when you need to get checked multiple times a month, that adds up. There are some months that I had 3 or more ultrasounds that month. So like those kind of monitoring sessions add up. Think about if you have a W-2 job and you still don't have fertility benefits, or you have only some fertility benefits, think about a health savings account or a flexible spending account and load up money there, right? Those are pre-tax dollars. And you can pay for medical expenses at your fertility clinic from those accounts. There's a dollar limit to how much you can spend, but put as much as you can towards that. Shop around between different clinics. I mean, that's what I did, and that's how I decided on CNY, right? I shopped around. I looked at the clinics around me and what they charged. I got advice from the infertility groups that I'm in on Facebook. and talked to people in my life that had undergone this. And that's how I was able to come to my decision. I mean, just to kind of give you like an idea of the lengths that I've gone to, I mean, I have actually considered moving back to Israel because of the insurance in Israel covering IVF. Like, I legitimately have thought about uprooting my entire life and moving there and getting my fertility treatments in Israel where it would be covered and where I would not have to deal with the craziness of insurance and paying out of pocket here. I ultimately decided that that was not the route for me quite yet. And why that is because, I mean, it would be a while until I could do that, right? I'd have to like get things prepared here, put my stuff in storage, move, get an apartment there. And as an Israeli citizen, like, I could technically live there for 6 months and qualify for insurance. But that would mean pushing this off by 6 months. And I don't know that I want to do that. I made a choice along with many other people to put my career and my business first, and also to wait until I met someone that I wanted to have a child with. And that means that I'm older, right? And so that is one of the setbacks or the difficulties that I'm facing, because yeah, I still have time, right? But it's not as much time as, let's say, I would have had if I would have done this 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And I really think back to when I had a thought many years ago of freezing my eggs and wondering, if that would have made a difference. And I think it might have. So egg freezing is something that you can look into if you are on the younger side, or even right now, if you're not ready to have a kid, but you want to make sure that that option is still available to you later. That is also something you can do at a fertility clinic. And I think CNY will do it for like $3,000. Otherwise, you're looking at about $10,000. But that's also a possibility. So if you're not ready to have kids, but I hate to say this, but you don't want to be in the position that I am today. And not to say that I regret anything, but it could have made this process a little bit easier and maybe a little bit cheaper for me if I had taken myself up on that many years ago. I was, I think, just so sure that because my family, like my mother had 6 kids and everybody in my family had multiple kids, that it would just not be an issue for me. But I have had many things happen, and I have had COVID, which has, I don't know if this is the reason, but I have been on birth control for many years, and I have a hormonal imbalance that just does not let me ovulate. So I've got, a huge hurdle to getting pregnant. So listen, and then later I found out that in my family itself, there had been cases of infertility that were treated with medication and, so many other things, that this is why I'm trying to open up, because I didn't know about any of it, because no one wanted to talk about it, right? It was always something that was hidden and that people just did not want to share. They didn't want, and I understand the feeling, because you feel sometimes like less of a human. You feel like less of a woman. Feel like there's something wrong with you. There's something broken. And I don't want anyone who's listening, I don't want you to feel like that. I want you to understand that there are options for you and there are ways to pay for them. Okay, so let's go back to the ways to pay. So we talked about grants. We talked about finding lower cost fertility clinics. We talked about HSA accounts and FSA accounts. Let's talk about just a regular savings account, right? So from the moment that you start trying to conceive, it is a good idea to start putting money into a savings account. And if you've been watching me for a long time, then you know I'm a big fan of automatic transfers. So set a small amount, a small automatic transfer every week and put it into a savings account that's labeled something that will make you feel like you're reaching your goal. So give it the name of your future baby. Give it the name of baby fund, or give it the name of IVF fund. And what happens is when you end up using the money from that account and put it into a high interest savings account, right? So one that's giving you a lot of interest. And when you end up using that money, because that money was earmarked for your goal, it will not feel like a burden when you take that money out. It will not hurt you, right? Because that money had a goal, you put it towards that goal, you succeeded that goal, and that's where the money is coming from. Thinking about saving also gives you a reason to think about what you're doing with your spending right now, right? So I'm a huge fan of budgets, and if you want to learn how to budget, you can contact me. If you want my budgeting sheet, you can contact me. But budgets will help you realize where you can cut your spending and where you can shift your priorities, really, and become more intentional with how you spend money so that you have additional money to put towards IVF and fertility treatments. Another big thing is one of the huge costs of IVF is the drugs, right? The medications. That is, I have in my fridge right now a medication where I can't even use anymore because I am not undergoing that treatment anymore. But that medication was $300 just for it, for that one syringe. And this stuff adds up. Just think about the amount of shots that you have to give yourself. It all really, really adds up. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can do. So like I have something sitting in my fridge right now. I can sell that. And there are groups where you can sell and trade and buy IVF medications. Now, it is difficult to tell you to do that because I don't want anyone to get sold fake stuff. But I know that there is a huge market. And there is also a huge market for generic, right? So like most of the time you're going to get prescribed the on brand name like medication. You don't have to use that one. You can go with the genetic. So be sure to talk to your doctor about what they're prescribing and if they allow generic and why or why not. There's like less expensive ones where you can mix them yourself. Like there are so many ways to kind of like cut costs as far as medication goes. There are even discount IVF medication programs that you can sign up to. There's something called the Compassionate Care Program. And that can really help as well, because you can get hefty discounts or like rebates and stuff like that. And you want to try to avoid over ordering, which is something that I clearly did because I have stuff sitting in my fridge right now that I don't need. I was supposed to need 3 shots, all out of one syringe, but like measured out. And because my body responds so quickly to medication, I only managed to get 1 shot in. So I've got, 2 more shots sitting in that syringe. Hi, Toya. Thank you for listening to my story. And thank you for saying that I'm amazing for sharing. It's kind of been a rough go, and I didn't know if I wanted to share this today, but I'm glad that I am. Okay, so try to get your doctors to be very specific in how much you need. A lot of times they will have you over order so that just in case you need more, like an extra day or 2 of injections, you have them, which is okay if you are going to be going through multiple treatments, but because you can use it again and again. I've had a progesterone cream that I only had to order once because I used it for like 3 treatments. Same thing with like progesterone capsules. I was able to use one 30-day supply for 2 different months. So there are different things that you can try to like, over the span of your treatments use. So you can't return them, and it's not really like, I'm gonna say this, it's kind of against the law to resell them, but you might be able to donate them to like different programs, or like join one of these Facebook groups and see how you can help someone else going through it. Okay, so sometimes people order only half the medication that they need, and then they'll call, they'll order for like 4 days or 5 days, and then they'll call and put in another order for more. So like, I'm just giving you options. Do not go to your doctor and be like, Financial Sharktress said to do this and this and this, but give them the options, right? That I told you, and see what they think about it, how they feel about it. Join fertility support groups. That is where I get the best information and the cost cutting information and the things that other people are doing to make it affordable for them. Also, if you're looking for insurance, your local fertility group, a lot of the women in your local fertility, or the people in your local fertility groups, will tell you there are companies that you can, if you can get a job with them, even if it's a second job or a part-time job, or I know a woman who has had 3 jobs at a time to be able to afford fertility treatments. And one of the jobs was specifically so that she could get an insurance that gave her fertility treatments. There are a lot of companies that are doing it. Some of them are just off the top of my head, like Facebook and Starbucks, Adobe. There's a ton. So do your research and see if you can find one that makes sense for your life. I think something like Starbucks is there. Lowe's, there's different lumber supply companies. Like it's so random, but you can do this. You can go and get a job at one of these companies, and even if it's your second job, and as long as you make the the necessary required hours, you can qualify for their insurance and get those benefits. So look into where you can apply to. Another thing is a loan, right? So here we go. Like sometimes you're going to have to get into debt to achieve this. Now, here are some things that you can do. You might qualify for a personal loan with a low interest rate. Something to think about before you do that is think about signing up for a credit card that has a 0% introductory rate. Okay? And sometimes that gives you like 0% interest over 12 months, 18 months, 21 months, so that you can pay it off slowly rather than having to pay it off or incur like 20% interest in a lot of cases with credit cards. So one thing to think about with that is make sure you know when that grace period expires. Set up a payment plan so that you're paid off by that time. And really, really understand that you may not be approved for a credit card with as much as you need, right? So even in those cases, you might have to take a payment plan, right? Because your credit limit might only be $3,000, right? But if you've got to pay $30,000, that is just a small chunk, right? But if you can break down the fertility treatments into payments, you might be able to kind of swing it. Okay? So think about how you can do that. Get the lowest interest debt that you can. Talk to your family members, right? Talk to your support system and open up with them and see if they are willing to help you. They might not be willing to donate, but they might be willing to give you a 0 interest loan. It's important to think about. And your family might want you to have this child just as much as you do, and they don't know how to help. But you can tell them how they can support you, and that is an option for you. Another thing is if you are itemizing your taxes, you can actually deduct the money that you spend on IVF as additional healthcare costs. So think about deducting it from your taxes, and that's another way that you could potentially kind of like get a little bit ahead of paying for it all, right? Like if you pay less taxes at the end of the year, then maybe it'll be a little bit more worth it. And that's something you can talk to your accountant about. That's something you should talk to your accountant about and figure out how to do. So now you know what I'm going through. Now you've got the options. Go out, do your research. Nothing that I say is set in stone. You can talk to me. You can comment how you paid for IVF or the different things that you've been looking at. I would love to know, because when you're going through this process, it feels so lonely and so alone. And knowing that someone else is out there and has been through it and is going through it, and has some information for you, is invaluable. It is just one of the best things that I started doing was going into all of these Facebook groups and listening and reading and asking questions, and then joining local support groups and talking to other people that have been through it, right? We are not alone. We are out there. There are so many people. You can walk into a room and there are so many people in that room going through something similar, if not the same to what you're going through. It is sad that we don't talk to each other about it, that taboo. And it pains me to think about that, because I try to live so transparently, and even I have had reservations about talking about this. I've talked about it on my podcast, Galit Speaks, but I have not talked about it here as much. Um, and I want to make sure I change that, because talking about money isn't tacky, and talking about IVF or how to pay for IVF doesn't make you broken or less of a person or less of a woman or whatever you're thinking that you are. So with that, I hope that I gave you some valuable information. I hope that you are able to share this with someone else who is thinking about it, looking into it. Um, there are so many different opinions and so many different resources out there. So I hope that you're sharing this with everyone who needs to hear it. And I hope this message gets out to someone who is watching right now and experiencing what I'm experiencing. I'd love to talk to you, and I'm here to talk to you. So have an amazing Money Monday. Tell me who you sent it to. Tell me what you're going through, and I will see you on Wednesday for an episode of the Galit Speaks podcast. And I will also see you next Monday for another episode of Money Monday Live. Bye, Sharks.